The brand new Netflix documentary, Evil Influencer, the Jodi Hildebrandt Story, is shifting the spotlight away from mom vlogger Ruby Franke and squarely onto Jodi Hildebrandt, the life coach who prosecutors say abused children and ruined lives. We are breaking down what the documentary reveals and the lasting fallout of this case with a first-hand account from somebody who claims she was directly subjected to Hildebrandt's methods. Welcome to Sidebar, presented by Law&Crime. I'm Jesse Weber. Now, before we go any further into this, there is something that we use here at Law&Crime that can be very, very useful to you. It's called Truth Finder. It is the powerful public records search service that we use to do research here on Law&Crime. But you want to talk about a useful resource? You plug in a name, you get address information, you get criminal history. And let me just say, this can give you some peace of mind. Truth Finder is one of the largest public records search services in the United States. And with a paid subscription, you can get access to unlimited reports about almost anyone. And that includes looking up registered sex offenders in your area too. So stay informed, stay safe, check public records with Truth Finder now at truthfinder.com/LC Sidebar. So if you followed true crime over the last couple of years, you know the names Ruby Franke and Jodi Hildebrandt. We have dedicated countless sidebars to full coverage of this disgusting story. And the story is chilling. You have a popular family vlogger, a trusted life coach in the Utah Mormon community, and a descent into extreme child abuse, all under the guise of counseling. We all saw the headlines when they were arrested. We've seen other documentaries like Hulu's Devil in the Family tell versions of the story, but there is a brand new Netflix documentary that just dropped. It's called Evil Influencer, the Jodi Hildebrandt Story, and it aims to go deeper than anything that came before, because this, in case you couldn't tell, focuses on Jodi Hildebrandt, how she gained so much power, how she isolated Ruby Franke, what really happened inside of that house. But here's what even this new documentary can't give you: a different first-hand account from somebody who was in Jodi Hildebrandt's orbit as a client. Because in just a little bit, we're going to bring on Stephanie Collins, a former client of Hildebrandt's who has spoken out before about this alleged manipulation that she says she experienced. She's going to talk about what it was like inside that world. So we're going to break down the new series, the lasting impact of this story, with somebody who actually lived it. And of course, if you know the story, this all centers on mom of six, Ruby Franke, a huge mommy vlogger on YouTube with her channel 8 Passengers, and of course, Jodi Hildebrandt, right? The second half of this licensed therapist, life coach who ran a company called Connections. They met through their tight-knit Mormon community in Utah around 2019. Hildebrandt presented herself as a spiritual guide, a counselor. She quickly became Ruby's seemingly business partner, closest confidant. And over time, according to prosecutors, Hildebrandt's influence turned extreme and abusive. She convinced Ruby that some of her children were possessed by evil spirits and needed severe punishment to repent. This breaking point, the breaking point, came in August of 2023. That's when Ruby's 12-year-old son escaped from Hildebrandt's home. He was emaciated, had duct tape on his extremities, went to a neighbor for help. Police found his younger sister in a similar state inside of Hildebrandt's house. The children described being tied up and starved and forced to do hard labor, subjected to brutal physical punishments. Both women were arrested. In December of 2023, they each pleaded guilty to 4 counts of aggravated child abuse. At their sentencing in February of 2024, a judge gave them the maximum, 4 consecutive prison terms of 1 to 15 years each. So that means the sentences could theoretically go up to 60 years, though I will tell you, under Utah's indeterminate sentencing system, it's really the Board of Pardons that will determine how long they can actually serve. They're both currently serving their sentences at the Utah State Correctional Facility, but are held separately. There's different housing. Their first parole hearing is apparently set for December of 2026, so that's the earliest possible date they could be released. But this legal case, while it's been resolved and they're in prison, the huge lingering question remains, and is, how did Jodi Hildebrandt gain so much control to make this happen? That is exactly what the new Netflix documentary tries to answer. That brings us to Evil Influencer, the Jodi Hildebrandt Story. And this isn't just a rehash of the news headlines. The documentary, that's directed by Skye Borgman, who also made Abducted in Plain Sight, it tries to trace the how, right? How did Hildebrandt operate for years within this community without being stopped? You know, the film starts with that critical moment, the security camera footage of Ruby's son escaping, asking a neighbor for help. But then it rewinds. It pieces together Hildebrandt's rise. It features interviews with former clients of her Connections program, and they describe her methods: isolating people from their families, using religious guilt as a weapon, creating a dependency on her for spiritual guidance. A key point that the documentary seems to emphasize is that for a long time, while the public focus was on Ruby Franke, right, the mom and the influencer, the film seemingly argues that it was Hildebrandt who was the architect. The abuse happened in her home. The title itself shifts the focus squarely onto her. And the documentary also includes a chilling update from the director, because she alleges that according to her sources, even in prison, Hildebrandt is reportedly repeating her patterns, forming small groups and trying to counsel other inmates. So the series aims to be a case study in perceived manipulation, showing how this influence built over years, hidden in plain sight within a trusted community, before it all escalated into criminal abuse and into a story that would be talked about around the world. Now, the documentary gives us a broader view through interviews with several former clients. But to really understand the personal day-to-day impact of Jodi Hildebrandt's methods, you need to hear from somebody who was in that room with her. That's where our guest comes in. Stephanie Collins was a former client of Jodi Hildebrandt, and she has come out and explained the effect that Hildebrandt had on her life, okay? I want to bring her on right now to talk about her experience, what she thinks of the documentary, why she believes Hildebrandt was able to operate for so long. Stephanie Collins, thank you so much for taking the time. Really, really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me on.
No, thank you for being here. Just to start off, because I don't know if a lot of people know your full story, when did you meet Jodi Hildebrandt, and what were the circumstances of that meeting or initial meetings where, you know, they talk about her appeal, they talk about how she got people to follow her and listen to her. Can you explain that initial meeting that you had with her, or how you were introduced to her?
So I met Jodi in December of 2018. I had gotten married that year, and I had my first baby in July, and we were obviously having a lot of marital issues. And so I had gone to my LDS bishop and asked him for help, and he recommended Jodi as a therapist to us. And so we started seeing her in December of that year.
And what were those initial sessions like?
At first, I really liked Jodi, and I trusted my bishop. He didn't know her personally, but there was someone else in our ward that was seeing her, and she liked her. She was also really expensive, and the church was paying for it for us. And so I felt very lucky to be there, and because I could never have afforded it on her own. And Jodi was very charismatic, and she acted like she had all the answers to our problems. She also took my side like right away, which felt great to me.
Mm-hmm.
And as you like, if you've seen the new documentary or any of the documentaries that have come out, then Jodi definitely like was very much on the women's side and against the men. And so for me, that felt really good because I was in a situation where I felt like I was being abused.
And what were some of the guidance that she was giving you? What were some of the lesson plans or strategies that she gave you and your husband?
So she separated us into, I had an individual session, he had individual sessions, and then we both were in her men's and women's groups. And she, at first, it was helpful because I hadn't had a lot of experience with therapy before. And so she introduced me to things like boundaries and learning about codependence and kind of taking like responsibility for just myself and not for him. And that all felt good and helpful. And then it didn't get weird for a little bit. Like she definitely like put up she put up this front at first that I've heard other people talk about, that she was much more professional and like taught you things that were very helpful. And then the longer you were with her, then the more she like got a little bit looser and like a little bit, you started seeing behind the door a little bit to how it was kind of culty. But at first I felt like, oh, this woman is going to help us. And
What got weird? What did she do?
hmm So one of the things that first got weird for me is how she would operate like in her groups. So she ran the her women's group that I went to, and she would really like call people out like pretty aggressively in the group. So like you had to report the things that you did. Like you had to every day you had to track things. You had to track how many times you were triggered. You had to track how many times you were in distortion. You had to track if you kept your commitments, things like that. And if your numbers weren't good enough for her, then she'd really like call you out in the group to where it felt kind of like public shaming there. And then we also had to make phone calls. We had to make 3 phone calls a day to other women in the group and talk through our triggers, which was really, really time consuming. And it was just a lot. And one of the women that I talked to, she kind of would just like bash Jodi a lot whenever I called her. And I just had started. And so I was like, it made me a little uncomfortable. So in my session with Jodi, I told her about this. And I was like, every time I call so and so, then she just wants to like bash you. And I'm uncomfortable with it. And so instead of Jodi maybe talking to her or having me have a private conversation with her, she told me that I needed to call her out in the group. And I was like really uncomfortable with that. So there were maybe like 10 or 12 of us in the group. And she was like, hey, Stephanie has something to say. And she like told me exactly what to say. And I called this woman out in front of everybody. It was really awkward. I didn't feel like good about it. But then Jodi was like, praised me for it and told me like this is how we hold each other accountable, and I was like, okay, I guess I'm doing something good. And so she kind of would make everyone turn against the person that wasn't doing things right. And there are more situations like that where I started feeling like I'm in a cult. Like I'm only allowed to talk to these people. We all have to hold each other accountable to these very specific standards or else you get shamed.
And what happened to your marriage after all this?
So like any men in her group were, if they weren't sex addicts or porn addicts, they were lust addicts just because they were a man. And that didn't feel helpful to me. And then when I told her that I didn't want to be with him, then she was like, well, he's living in truth now. Like she encouraged me to be with him because he was like meeting with her and all this stuff, even though I kept telling her I didn't want to be with him, which was strange. So me and her ended up just like arguing every session about whether or not I should be with him instead of her supporting my decision, which I found really bizarre.
And was that how there was a falling out between you two? I mean, when did you stop seeing her?
I stopped in the summer of 2019, maybe July or August, I can't remember. But I started feeling I communicated this to her that I just didn't really feel like I was getting anything out of like meeting with her anymore. And because yeah, it was like she wasn't supporting the things that I wanted.
Right.
Um when I communicated that to her, then she would try to convince me to stay. She would tell me that I would never find another therapist that could help me. And then she told me that I was an addict myself, that I was a control addict. And so she had me start doing an addiction recovery program. She had me get a sponsor. And maybe a month later, I was like, this is dumb. And then I like quit for real. But she really like tried to get me to stay. She kept charging our bishop. And so then it's like we had more sessions that they'd paid for. And
Yeah.
so we kind of just kept going way longer than we wanted to.
And when this broke with Ruby Franke in 2023, and then you had more people coming out, and the whole world is now seeing what was going on, what was your reaction to that?
I was really surprised for a second because I was like, oh, I haven't heard anything from Jodi for a while. And then when I read about it, and I was shocked and very sad at like the gravity of it, but I wasn't really surprised. Um it felt validating a little bit because I knew that there was something off about her, and I had talked to other women in our group about it, and they were all just like they wouldn't talk about her at all, and because she's the leader. And so I felt like no one ever believed me that there was something weird about her. And so it felt very validating and also very sad, obviously.
Do you think when you look at it, does it make sense that she was capable of abusing children?
Yeah, it does. I mean, just based on like the things that she would say, like, and the punishments that she would encourage. And like, I was shocked that it got to that degree. But I think that Ruby was like, they were just the perfect mix
Yeah.
to make that happen. I don't know that Jodi would have done that necessarily without Ruby, although she did with Jesse. So maybe she would have, but
Yeah, no. Unfortunately, I think you're right. It is a very scary combination. This documentary comes out, and I understand you watched the whole thing. Did
Mhm.
it resonate with you when you're listening to these stories? You're listening to Jodi Hildebrandt. I mean, what stood out to you about it?
I liked that they had some more of her clients on, and there's been more and more clients coming out, specifically about like the separating husbands from wives and that stuff. And that didn't happen to me, but it happened. There were a lot of women in my group that were separated from their husbands, and I'm just glad that more people are talking about that. And like, that's not normal. Like everyone in my group, it seemed like their lives only got worse when they started meeting with her for the most part. Um, and I think that she's hurt a lot of people.
You mentioned before how she was charismatic. This documentary goes through these methods of isolation, the language that was used. What do you think was like the single most effective tactic that she uses or that she used to gain control?
I think that the empowering the women to make them feel like they were the boss, I think that that was very effective because most of her clients were Mormon, and Mormon women don't have any experience with being in control of anything. And so when it feels like, oh, this person's on my side, and this person thinks that women can also be spiritual leaders, um, I think that that sucked us all into this like alternate reality where like we could be the ones in charge. And then you start implementing consequences on your husband, and then the therapist is there saying she's right, and if you don't do this then these things will happen. um I think that that was really effective in like scaring the men into compliance.
Now, the director here mentions that, or alleges in prison, that Jodi's reportedly trying to form groups and counsel inmates. I mean, if that is true, does that surprise you? Does that track with the person you knew? Because she issued apology, right, in court when she pled guilty, and yet, if she's doing something similar behind bars, if that's true, what are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, I believe that 100%. I don't, Jodi's not someone to back down from. Like, I think that she actually believes what she is doing, and I think that she's delusional. It doesn't surprise me at all, because I think that in order for her to like accept responsibility for any of it, that would tear down her entire sense of self. Like, I think that she is going to just keep going, and it scares me if were she to ever get out.
You've
She's
talked
still a big
about,
influence.
yeah,
Sorry.
you've talked about how she was, able to do this, right? And she was on this like approved list of counselors. She was a licensed therapist. Do you think the system failed? What needs to be done? I mean, the fact that she was able to operate in the way that she was, what do you think?
I think that there's a problem in general with therapy, especially in Utah, um, because of the church. And Jodi had a lot of influence in the community because she was a member of the church. And so in the Mormon community, you tend to trust people just based on their membership status. Um, and that's a problem. And then I think that the church liked her, at least at first, because she's doing therapy through the lens of religion. And I think that the church is maybe getting better with therapy, but like at least in the past, it was kind of like, don't go to therapy because who knows what they're going to tell you. And if you do go to therapy, go to LDS Family Services or like an approved therapist because I don't know. I don't know why. But Jodi had a big influence in the church in general. She was talking to, at least what she told me, she was talking to the Young Women's Presidency, the General Young Women's Presidency. She was trying to get meetings with um, like the prophet and the first presidency. She had told me about apostles that she was in communication with. Sometimes she was teaching uh, her principles like in her own ward, like her own church, local community. Um, she told me that she had a pilot program with the missionaries. I don't know if any of that is true. That's just what she told me.
Mm-hmm.
But she had her heels in with the church itself, and she had a lot of influence in the church. And I always got the impression that she was kind of trying to take over, like get her doctrine into the church at large, which scared me because obviously like the church at large has a huge influence. And so I think that Jodi had big plans for like, going even further than she did.
Listen, I don't know what was going on in her mind. It's a scary place to be, but you make a good
Yeah.
point. I mean, it's something to be thinking about. While I have you, I wanted your perspective on something. While Jodi and Ruby, they're in prison, I do have to mention to everybody out there that life has moved on for the Franke family in significant ways. There have been some major personal milestones. You see this family trying to rebuild. So Ruby and Kevin, their divorce was finalized in March of 2025. Kevin was awarded full custody of their 4 minor children. Kevin remarried this past November. He married a woman named Becca Bevan. His daughter, Sherry, who's now 22, written a memoir about her experience, shared a wedding photo, writing in part, "When I was younger, I could always see he wasn't happy. I'm so glad I was there to witness his love story." She asked for kindness, saying, "You do not know my dad. He is a wonderful man." Their son, Chad, who's 20, also got married this year. There's, again, seems to be a clear effort to move forward in the wake of everything, the destruction that Jodi left behind. Stephanie, from your perspective, when you see updates like this, what goes through your mind? Does it feel like there is a path on the other side? I know it's a very complex situation, but when you see the Franke family trying to go on the other side of this, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I do think that there is. I worry a lot about the little kids that were abused. I worry about their future the most. Um, but yeah, I'm really happy for all
Yeah.
the older Franke family that I hear about and like that they've been able to move on. And I'm glad that Kevin has custody of the kids and they're hopefully all together and healing and moving forward. I do think that at least for me, like seeing Jodi and my experience wasn't super drastic with her, like nothing really crazy happened. But I do feel like I learned a lot from being with like meeting with Jodi and being part of that. It helped me figure out like how to kind of suss out like behavior like that in other situations and like how to really be able to stand on my own 2 feet and not listen to things that I don't feel are right. And I hope that other people in that same situation have like learned how to listen to their own intuition and that hopefully overall it can be a good thing.
Steffi, I'm really enjoying talking to you, and I think you have an important story to tell, an important perspective, which is why it's confusing to me. And correct me if I'm wrong, I thought this was really interesting, but I believe you mentioned to our team that you actually had several meetings with Netflix to be in this documentary. Can you talk to us about what that is and why they might have chosen not to include your story as part of this?
Um, I think maybe because mine wasn't typical. Like I don't most of the stories that most documentaries have focused on are like the separation of the husband and wife and the keeping the men away from their children, probably because that's what happened with Kevin. Um, but there were other people that met with Jodi that, and I guess that's why I think my story is important, is that that wasn't the only situation. She had people meeting with her that had eating disorders. I saw someone come in that had really severe OCD. Yeah, there were some other situations of like abusive relationships. And so she met with all kinds of people, and that wasn't always her tactic, although it was common.
Yeah.
And so there were definitely other people affected as well.
Well, I hope people watch this and get a sense of what you experienced and your thoughts on this. Again, I think it's a very important story to tell. I appreciate you taking the time to come on here and share this. I know it can't be easy, but Stephanie Collins, thank you again for coming here on Sidebar.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And that's all we have for you right now here on Sidebar, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us. And as always, please subscribe on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you should get your podcasts. You can follow me on X or Instagram. I'm Jesse Weber. I'll speak to you next time.